Good morning, church family. Pastor Dennis here with your weekly video devotional. Noah did our devotional last week, did a great job giving us some wisdom from the book of Proverbs. If you haven't watched Noah's devotional from last week, you can find it on our YouTube channel. There's a link in our on our Facebook page. So I would recommend go back and watch that. It was a good word from the book of Proverbs. Today, I'd like to share with you something from the book of John, John chapter 5. As you know, I'm walking through the Gospels in my personal devotional time. I'm trying to abide with Christ as he tells us to do in John 15. But in John chapter 5, we come across a very familiar story about a man who was crippled for 38 years, had been hanging out by the pool of Bethesda in Solomon's portico, just hoping to be taken down to the waters, which were believed to have some healing power or just some relief from the pain and the issues they've been dealing with. But he'd been hanging out by this pool for quite a while and had never experienced the healing, the restoration that he was hoping for. Anyway, Jesus comes along and finds this man, and he asks him, he says, "Do you want to be made well?" And the man gives him the excuses that, well, I don't have anybody to take me down, and whenever it is my turn, whenever I get ready to go down, somebody else steps in front of me. And then Jesus tells him, he says, "Get up, take up your bed, and walk, and go home," basically is what he's saying. And it said that immediately the man was made well and was able to get up and take up his bed, that he had received that immediate restoration and healing just from Jesus's word that shows us the power of his word and his willingness to heal and to help people. But then after that, the man is found walking, and it's the Sabbath. He's taking his stuff home, and the religious leaders get angry with him that he's working on the Sabbath, that he's carrying his bed, something they weren't supposed to do, but even though Jesus told them to do it. And so they get angry and they ask him, "Who told you to do this? Who healed you? Why are you doing what you're doing?" And he couldn't remember who it was. He didn't recognize that it was Jesus because there was a lot of people there at the pool of Bethesda. Anyway, we come to this part later in the passage in verse 14, and it says, "Afterward," so a little bit later, "Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, 'See, you have been made well. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you.' The man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well." So Jesus finds the man again, and the man recognizes Jesus, obviously. And Jesus asked him, Jesus says to him, he says, "See, you've been made well. You've been healed. You've been restored." And then he tells him to sin no more, to start living differently because of and based on his healing. But he says, "Lest a worse thing come upon you." So I want us to think about that for just a moment, that he says, "Sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you." And what could be worse than a physical disability, something that that stopped you from being able to do anything for 38 years? Well, the spiritual disability, the spiritual problems that we have from our sin, those are far worse than any physical disability. I think Jesus is showing us and telling us here that the spiritual is more important than the physical. And sometimes we forget that because really all we see is the physical. We don't recognize our own spiritual disability as much as we would our physical disabilities. So he tells them that go and sin no more, lest something worse happen to you. And that's important for us to remember, that our sin is far more destructive and debilitating than any type of physical suffering, any type of physical pain, any type of physical injury, anything that we could be going through. Our spiritual health is much more important than our physical health. And he says, "You have been made well." Before that, "See, you have been made well, sin no more." And I think the encouragement for us is that if you've been healed by Jesus, if you've been saved by Jesus, if he has healed your soul and you've been restored and now you're a child of God and you will spend eternity with him, then our obligation while we're here is to sin less. We'll never be sinless, we'll never be perfect, but we should be sinning less. We should be taking and looking for opportunities to kill the sin in our own lives, and to be mindful of the things that tempt us and cause us to sin. We should be looking out for those things and taking heed to those things, because when Jesus heals us, there's a call to sin less, to be more righteous, to seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, to hunger and to thirst for righteousness. Those are things that should be that should describe us as believers. So if you've been healed by Jesus, then you should be looking for opportunities to sin less in your own life, to go and sin no more, recognizing that the sin that we commit is far worse, and our spiritual health is far more important than our physical health. And our sin, that's what disables us spiritually. That's what debilitates us spiritually. It's the sin in our lives. The last thing I want to mention is just verse 15. It said, the man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. The encouragement for us is to tell other people that it's Jesus who has saved us. It's Jesus who has made us well. It's Jesus who is the answer for their spiritual problems as well. I hope this video encourages you today to think about your spiritual health over your physical health, to see opportunities where you can sin less, and to seize those opportunities as well, but also to be challenged and encouraged to go tell other people that it's Jesus who can make them well also. God bless, and we will see you later this week.